John Faulkner, you're very welcome, and thanks so much for joining the Irish Traditional Music Archive here in Queally's pub, a very iconic location here in Miltown, Malbay, at Skull Sour Willie Clancy. Your own life in music has been an epic voyage to this point. Take us back to the early years and where you were born and how your first earliest musical influence, what drew you towards a life in music.
Okay. Thanks very much for having me, by the way. It's great to be here. I remember this bar so very, very well. There's some occasions when I was here which I don't remember very well for obvious reasons. But anyway, no, I was born in Oxford, in England, and I grew up in London. And my father was a violinist, not as a professional, well, he's still a semi-professional violinist. He played in a little dance band. My mother played the piano. I have a brother and sister who are not really musical at all. They like music, but they don't play. And I started playing the guitar when I was about 14, I suppose, just messing around with it, sort of with different influences. I'd been listening to a lot of the blues and people like Muddy Waters and some of the older blues musicians like Blind Lemon Jefferson and Big Bill Broonzy and people like that, and Leadbelly. And so I got sort of into traditional music via Americana traditional music and blues. And then sort of a bit later on, I was also interested in jazz. I couldn't play, I wasn't a jazz player, but I loved sort of jazz guitar and Django Reinhardt and people like that, and listening to that kind of stuff. But later on, when I was probably in my late teens, I was kind of more interested in folk music, and the English folk scene had begun to really take off then. So there were folk clubs everywhere. So I started playing gigs with a woman called Sandra Clare, who played the guitar and the concertina, and we used to go out together and play in folk clubs all around the south of England and sometimes further north. And but then I sort of, not overnight, but I discovered the great wealth of Irish music in London at the time. And we became very friendly with Tom McCarthy. And so we got to know Tom very well and the whole family. And of course, young Tom wasn't even born then, so it was kind of like a long time ago. I'm not going to go into years now because I sometimes find that a little bit difficult to remember what year happened when. But and then you met Bobby Casey, knew Bobby very well, and Roger Sherlock, Raymond Rowland, and people like that, and a whole host of great musicians that lived in London at the time. And I met them. I met them largely through a flute player called Gabriel Sullivan. The Gabe, as he was known he was from North Galway, and he played a kind of very much a kind of East Galway style of flute playing, and was influenced largely by Paddy Fahey and the likes of people like that, and Paddy Canny, and so he was a big influence, and he a great mine of information as well. I mean, what he didn't know about traditional music and musicians was kind of, not worth knowing, because he knew it all, and he was friendly with a lot of people like Joe Heaney and singers and Martin Burns and people like that. So that's how I kind of drifted into, a bit later on, when I'd met Dolores Kane, we used to sort of play together and do some gigs together as well, and we toured a lot we toured a lot in Germany, Holland, Belgium, France to some extent, and mostly over Europe. We hadn't arrived, or we hadn't managed to get any tours in the States at that stage, but we did later on. And we spent a good part of about 7 or 8 years just touring on and off, 3 or 4 tours a year.
You're very interested that the launch for that though was that really vibrant traditional music scene in London at the time. It was spectacular. I mean, with spectacular musicians.
Fantastic, yeah.
It's a very important period in the history of Irish traditional music, and you were immersed in that.
Yeah.
It's interesting. That was probably your inspiration to move into more Irish music.
What absolutely was. That was it. But I was always interested in singing as well. So I'd been, had quite a strong interest in sort of traditional singers from Scotland and Ireland, and then. I'd spent quite a lot of time working with Ewan MacColl, and he had a great interest in Irish traditional singing. He was a great friend of Joe Heaney's and Paddy Tunney. So I was introduced to all that kind of stuff, and then great that we had Cecil Sharp House there, where we had an archive which you could go into, and you could listen to anything there. You couldn't record anything. But of course, we used to sneak a little Walkman in there and sometimes just copy stuff for our own use, not for redistribution. And then I got to hear people like Bridget Tunney's, Paddy's mother, who was a phenomenal singer. I mean, phenomenal. I think she's one of the best traditional. And then people like Geordie Hanna, a lot of singers from the north who wouldn't always have been that sort of popular down here, but. They had fantastic songs, and Cathal McConnell and people like that. Great stores of songs, and that's where Dolores learned a lot of her songs from people like that, from her aunts, of course, and her grandmother, and her mother, and people like Cathal McConnell. That's where she got The Rambling Irishman, was from Cathal McConnell. And then we used to delve into the archive, and we'd come up with songs like, she did a great job on one of our albums of... Craigie Hills.
Fantastic, yeah.
Songs like that. But what a song! I don't know if you.
That recording is iconic. Trust me, it's worn out on bad by all musicians, and a beautiful arrangement. And beautiful arrangement with Martin O'Connor's Nuffle in it, and who's playing the flute? Paul, was it? Paul Roach, was it?
On that song, is it?
That song, the recording that was filmed, and Eamon Curran was playing the whistle,
pipes.
yeah.
Oh, the whistle, yeah. Jeez, I can't remember.
Yeah, but it's one of the iconic recordings of traditional singing, and beautiful arrangement.
Yeah.
And you got into arrangement at a young age. You were the.
Well, it kind of just fell that way, really. I mean, if we were making, we made an album for Queally, or Dolores made an album for Queally that Gareth de Bruyne commissioned. It was an album called There Was a Maid, and that was kind of traditional Irish songs, not in Irish, but traditional songs in English. And there's one English song on it as well, which is, I think, called There Was a Maid. Well, it's an English version of a song, which I had heard a long time before that, and I suggested it to her and she liked it. So we made that, and then we made that album for Mulligan Records, which was Broken Hearted, I Wonder. And now, I didn't produce that. PJ Curtis produced that. And then as things went on, I would sort of do arrangements of songs, and then an arrangement would sort of just, segue into a production. So it was kind of like it was almost like, no, I didn't produce all the albums, but I did produce some of the later albums, that she made. We had a lot of, there was a huge amount of material to draw from, really, when you think about it. I mean, as all those singers at the time, like, the Clare and people like that, they had their own sort of groundswell of inspiration from their background. Dolores had a lot of that from her mother and her aunts. They sang mainly in English, but her mother used to sing in Irish, so she had got some of the Irish songs from her mother.
It must have been a very exciting period musically.
Well, I mean, as I was saying before, there was a fantastic amount of music in London, then Irish music in London, and it was just great to be to be associated with such good musicians, the likes of Bobby Casey and Raymond Rowland and people like that, and Roger Sherlock, and we used to tour. Well, I say we, myself and Dolores, we had little different times, different little bands. It might be a trio or 4 people, and like Eamon Curran was one of the people in the band, and Kieran Crean would have been, was a nephew of Junior's.
Yeah.
And we traipsed around all over Belgium, Holland, Germany. Germany was like, as we all know, was like the go-to place. We used to do like 3 tours a year, and we might go in the spring and do kind of like 25 or 30 gigs back to back, and then go again a bit later in the year and do another same amount of gigs, but all different gigs. There were hundreds and hundreds of gigs there, and they were great. And then they had the German Folk Festival tour as well, which was a guy called Carsten Linder organised that, and we used to go on that, where they'd get a bunch of people, like maybe 2 bands and some solo artists, like Michael Russell was a big favourite on those. And there'd be about 5 or 6 acts, and you all go around in a bus and just go from one venue to another all around Germany. Big venues, sort of concert halls and, places like that. And
the folk scene itself, the folk club scene, was very sympathetic with traditional music, and the two were sort of the great respect for traditional music even within that scene. It helped it give it a platform and for people to actually perform and play, and it was kind of central to it in many ways.
Yeah, well, it was, but not so much in England, actually, funnily enough. I mean, the English folk scene was, I always got the feeling that they didn't really go very much for Irish music or Irish traditional singing, because I think they thought it encroached on their territory a bit, Now, different in Scotland. You can go to Scotland and do gigs in Scotland, it's great. But in England, and there were places in England where you could go where it's great, like the Whitby Folk Festival always has a number of Irish acts, and still do today, and they've been going for about 50 years, And then some of the other big festivals were good, but a lot of the little English folk clubs were pretty English nationalistic in a way, and which kind of, it meant, I mean, we used to spend most of our time when we lived in London, we used to spend most of our time touring outside Britain. And, that was, and to some extent here in Ireland, there was a folk scene here in Ireland, which was great. And there were great folk clubs in Ireland and in the north. In Northern Ireland, and there were great venues there. So we had a great time from that point of view, and this was right at the height of the Troubles as well, but we never ever had a problem. We'd go to these places, and the audiences would very often be mixed. There'd be small gigs, like, but you never got the feeling that there was any, problem with some of those small venues, even at the height of the Troubles in Northern Ireland.
Persevered through it.
Yeah, it's great. But that was the time in England. Then myself and Dolores decided to move back and live in Ireland in 1982, and that's what we did. And then we went on to record a few other albums and so on, and that until we broke up, which would have been about 82, about 10 years later. But we still worked together after that as well, and still do from time to time. So,
Right.
So yeah, it was great.
Would you like to try a song for us?
Yeah, I'll try one. It's a bit early in the day, but it might be a bit croaky. But we'll try something. Should I do? This is a composed song. It's one of Eric Bogle's songs. Is that all right?
Yeah, great.
Eric Bogle, the man responsible for songs like The Band Plays Waltzing Matilda and The Green Fields of France. He specialised in anti-war songs. I like this one. It's not so well known as some of the others, but I still like it. It's called All the Fine Young Men. They told all the fine young men of when this war is over, there will be peace, and the peace will last forever. In Flanders field, at the moonshine and Beersheba, for king and country, for honour and duty, the young men fought and cursed and wept and died. They told all the fine young men of when this war is over, in your country's grateful heart, we'll cherish you forever. To Brook and Alamein, at Boona and Kokoda, like your fathers before, in a world mad with war, the young men fought and cursed and wept and died. For many of those fine young men, all the wars are over, they have found peace. It's the peace that lasts forever. When the call comes again, they will not answer. They're just forgotten bones, lying far from their homes, as forgotten as the cause for which they died. Ah, young men, can you see now why they lied?
Lovely, John. It was beautiful and very, very relevant to in today's big debate going on in Ireland.
Unfortunately, yeah.
Yeah. Beautiful song. Beautiful song.
I like that song. I think it's one of his best songs, actually.
Yeah.
I mean, I like his other songs.
He's a brilliant
too,
songwriter.
but
Yeah.
He's a good old wordsmith sometimes.
Brilliant.
Yeah.
Brilliant. Along with, you've been touching on part of your extensive musical journey and career, you also directed a number of serious programmes about music. I'm known about the John Carignan one. Tell us a bit of how you got involved in that area of work. And
Oh, right, yeah. Well, when I was in London, and I was talking there earlier on about Bobby Casey, a friend of mine that worked for the BBC, a guy called Nigel Williams, he used to do an art. He used to make documentaries for an arts programme on the BBC called Second House, I think it was called. I'm not quite sure. And it was a kind of an arts review programme, on TV. And I talked him into doing a little 15-minute film on Irish musicians in London. So which we did, and it was Bobby Casey, Roger Sherlock, and Tom McCarthy. And it was a nice little film because it showed them at work and then playing music. So you had that sort of juxtaposition of Tom McCarthy, who used to operate sort of earth-moving machines with like 50 levers and huge big machines. And then there's doing that, and then he's playing that little tiny concertina. It's kind of like the opposite of what. And then Bobby Casey was at the time he was a school caretaker, and he used to go around a secondary school somewhere in Camden Town, sweep with a sweeping brush, and then there would be him and Roger Sherlock was a block layer. So that was what the film was about. So what these guys did during the day and then what they did at night, you know. And it was shown in this little arts program called Second House, which was great. And if you've got time, I'll tell you a little story about that. But the everybody was invited to in order to show this film. You also had to appear live. I didn't, but they did live in the studio in BBC studio wherever that was. I think White City or somewhere. I can't remember. But anyway, and they were only one item on this particular program. Another, they might have a poet doing something, and then there might be something. And then on that particular program, they had the modern German, modern abstract composer Stockhausen, right? And he was, I don't know if you know Stockhausen's music, but it's all very atonal, and it wouldn't be particularly my cup of tea. But you know, I give them credit for what they do. But he had written this piece of music, which in order to play it for the program, they had to hire in a kind of bunch of musicians union musicians to come in and play it. See, he couldn't have his own small orchestra. They had to hire someone from the musicians union rules. You hire someone from their pool. So there were about 6 of these guys came in, like with cello and violin, viola, and blah blah. And anyway, the boys did their. We showed their little film, and then they played 2 tunes. And I remember the name of one. They played Sixpenny Money, and I can't remember the name of the other tune, but they played those live on stage and this thing. They came into the green room, and Tom McCarthy's Kathleen was there with all the girls in the green room watching their dad playing. And then Stockhausen came on. He talked about his thing, and he did his stuff. And then when that was over, his musicians came into the green room, and he came in and sat over there. Stockhausen himself, he was sitting over there, and all these other concert musicians, classical musicians, gathered round Tommy and Bobby and that, and they said, "We thought your stuff was absolutely great, much better than the shite we had to play." And your man was in earshot. It was one of the funniest things ever. Anyway, so I did that, and then with the same film producer, he was doing a series of films called Passage West, which was about the emigration from the UK and Ireland to Canada, and in particular to Prince Edward Island. And there were 3 films in that. And he said to me, and I was musical advisor on those films, and he said, "You know anybody they wanted to record some music in Montreal, because it was a co-production between the National Film Board of Canada and the BBC." And so he said, I said, "I do. I know one musician. I've never met him, but he's a guy called Jean Carignan, and he lives in Montreal," which is, they said, "Oh, great," because they could get the studio. The studio in Montreal was the Canadian Film Board studio, sound studio. So we booked him. I'd never met him, to sort of play some incidental music to the shots that they'd done, to the rushes. And he came in, and I was expecting a big tall guy, you know, because in the photograph he looked like a kind of lumberjack. Actually, he was only about 5'5", and very small and very petite, and complete opposite what you expect. Anyway, he came in and he sat down. He said, "Yeah, sure." I didn't speak that good English either. His English was pretty limited, but very nice man. Anyway, he sat down and he did everything in one take. He just looked at stuff and played. Done. It was fantastic. And Philip Donnellan, the producer, said to me, "We have to make a film about this guy." And this was in the day when the BBC seemed to have quite a lot of money that they could plough into stuff like that. So we made a film called The Pilgrimage of Dijon, which was his pilgrimage to Ireland to visit the birthplace of Michael Coleman, because he was a Michael Coleman fanatic. and he played a lot of stuff like. Have you seen that movie?
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's fantastic. Yeah.
But I mean, if anything, his bow technique was a little bit more accomplished than Coleman's, because he had a fantastic bow technique.
Yeah.
I don't know if there's anything in that. I can't remember now. There is, I think, in that film where he plays flying staccato with the bow, where he bounces the bow on the strings, in a tune that he was famous for called La Rille du Pendu. Fantastic playing, you know. Anyway, so we came over to Ireland. We travelled around with him. Dolores and myself travelled around with him to here, to Moloch, to Dublin, to various parts, but mainly Dublin and the west of Ireland and Galway and so on. And
Bumped into John Kelly, didn't you?
but John Kelly, yeah, in the Four Seasons.
Yeah,
that's right.
fantastic,
And there was a good few musicians there that were in that movie. And then we went up to Sligo and did a concert in Gochin in Sligo with Seamus Tansey.
brilliant.
Very interesting. That was. It was very good. Tansey was a big fan.
Yeah.
You know. So and then he played, and Charlie Lennon played the piano in that concert. I seem to remember that. Yeah, it was great. And he was. And then we went to Montreal and we did some more work there with him. And I stayed. When I say we stayed with him. Myself and Dolores stayed in his house for about a week. Got to know him really well. He lived in a place called La Prairie in Montreal, and that's totally French-speaking part of the city. And what a man. And then, I mean, I did a few films with Philip Donnellan as a musical advisor. I was never employed directly by the BBC, but we did quite a lot of work. That was about the extent. I mean, after that, I did do a little bit of writing, sort of incidental music for stuff as well, you know, small TV things and stuff like that. Yeah.
And you enjoyed that period of your life. So where are you now, John? What your latter years, where did you worked with an awful lot of fantastic musicians over the years. Talk us through some of them collaborative stuff you did with, I know you played a lot with Artie McLean and different people over the years.
Yeah, well, I mean, we had... A lot of that was during the time when myself and Dolores were on the road, and then, we mightn't do anything for a while, and then she would say to me, "Will you put a band together for me?" So, and I put a band together for her. Depending on she went through a phase where she wanted to wanted to broaden out the kind of spectrum of her repertoire, really. Some of which I didn't really like, but I didn't say, it's what she wanted to do, so you get musicians that can do that kind of. Artie was one of them. I mean, Artie was such a fantastic, all-round great musician. We even had one band that Jim Core was in as well, before he was famous. He was a great musician too, fantastic musician. Brendan O'Regan was in a couple of the bands. We toured a bit. We went to Hong Kong with that band. We did a few gigs with Mick Hanley, and we had another band which Owen O'Reevig was in. I think you know Owen, of course, from Cork, and he's a great musician for accompanying as well as just a great player. I mean, he has a good sort of ear for songs too, So we did a couple of really interesting gigs there. We did one with that band which was a double-headed gig with Emmylou Harris and her band. We played a small 3-gig tour in Belfast, Dublin and Cork with her, and we were recording at the time, and we just finished recording a song. It wasn't finished, just did a take of a song in Windmill of a song that was written by Donna Long. I don't know if you know Donna Long in Cork. Great songwriter. And he's written this song called Never Be the Sun. And he sent me 6 songs, and I picked that one out and said, Dolores, does that suit you? Have a listen to that. And she said, yeah, it really does. So anyway, she recorded it. And when we were on the tour, we were playing a Saturday night in the stadium in Dublin. And after the gig, I said to Emmylou Harris, "Are you busy tomorrow?" She said, "No, it's Sunday." So I said, "Well, we're in the studio tomorrow. Would you come in and sing a backing vocal on this song?" And she said, "Yeah, sure." She said she hadn't even heard the song, you know. But that's what I found with some people like that. They're so unpretentious and accommodating. She came in and she sat in the control room. It's Emmylou Harris. She sat in the control room and took out a packet of cigarettes, Sweet Afton cigarettes, and she lit one up. No filter, you know. I thought, geez, I don't believe this. And while she's listening to the song, she said, I only smoke these when I'm in Ireland.
Just as well.
And she listened to the song. She said, that's a really, really pretty song. So she went in and in 2 takes she had it. Fantastic. And subsequent to that, she recorded it with Dolly Parton and Linda Ronstadt, you know, the trio. That song, because she'd heard it on Dolores' version of it. So that was talk about working with famous people. That was probably one of the most. And you know, we did a lot of stuff with. Well, Dolores did a lot of stuff after that I wasn't involved in. She did stuff with Pete Seeger and Tommy Sands and people like that. And yeah, I also did. I just recently made an album, which I'll give you a copy here. And John Prine was a great visitor to Kinvara where I live, and he the late John Prine, unfortunately, and I said to him one day, this was, Jesus, I can't remember, it wasn't that long ago, it was just before COVID. And I said to him, I'm making this album, there's a song in it, would you sing it with me on it? She said, yeah, sure. So I said, no, hold on, you haven't heard it. He said, I'll do it anyway. I thought, wow, taking a bit of a chance he was, you know. And he heard it and he loved it. So he sings a song with me as a kind of duet. He sings a couple of verses and I sing a couple of verses on this new album. And I think it might be the last thing he ever recorded.
Wow.
I think, I was talking to his wife, Fiona, and she thinks it's probably the last thing that he recorded. And it's a song which I wrote with a guy called Peter O'Hanlon from Strabane, another great guitar player and songwriter. But anyway, that's an album of original songs, which was my last thing that I did really.
I know you're reflecting a lot on your life because you've actually you're completing your memoirs at the moment, aren't you?
I am, yeah.
And just judging by even this short conversation, we look forward greatly to publication of that and reading about what is an extraordinary life in music, John.
Well,
we're very privileged to have you here today. Thanks very much for your time with us. Will you do one more song for us to see us out?
Yeah.
That's okay?
I suppose that, yeah.
Great.
Let me see. When Bonny commanded his army to stand, he levelled his cannon right over the land. And he levelled his cannon, his victory to gain, and slew my light horseman on the way coming home. Broken-hearted I'll wander, broken-hearted I'll remain, since my bonny light horseman in the wars he was slain. I was a small bird and had wings to fly, I'd fly across the salt sea to where my love does lie. And with my fond wings I beat over his grave, kiss the pale lips that lie cold in the clare. Broken hearted I'll wander, broken hearted I remain, since my bonny light horseman in the wars he was slain. Now the dove she laments for her mate as she flies. Where, tell me, where is my darling, she cries. And where in this wide world is there one to compare with my bonny light horseman who was slain in the war? Broken hearted I'll wander, broken hearted I remain, since my bonny light horseman in the wars he